What would happen if every human being on Earth simply disappeared? This isn't the story of how we might vanish. It's the story of what happens to the world we leave behind. In this episode of Life After People, divine images rot from within, while Satan's minions multiply. Can the forces of darkness bring down God's holy sanctuaries? Welcome to Earth. Population 0. The streets of Earth are empty. And the faithful no longer fill the pews in the millions of houses of worship around the world. The flocks have all gone from St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, where a faith thrived for 2 millennia, in the hall where the Shroud of Turin was displayed, and in America's megachurches, where millions of Christians once prayed. Humans built their religious structures and monuments to last for eternity. But eternity is a very long time. One day after people. In Rio de Janeiro, high above the city of God, Christ the Redeemer towers over a landscape that was once home to more than 6 million souls. Completed in 1931 and rising 130 feet, the statue has a secret. It seems to withstand everything nature can throw at it, even frequent bolts of lightning. It's poised for a long reign on Earth. But one day after people, as power plants begin to shut down around the world, will the Redeemer continue to be a light in the darkness? Two days after people, the image of Jesus Christ lives on around the world. In the time of humans, the most controversial was the Shroud of Turin. Many Christians believed that the shroud was the cloth in which the body of Christ was wrapped. Millions of people would descend on Turin for rare public viewings, only held about once every 25 years. In the past, the shroud was rolled on a wooden dowel and stored in a casket covered with asbestos to safeguard against fire.
It was determined that continued rolling of the shroud onto this dowel and keeping it in this casket was not very good for its conservation and preservation. So a new container was designed and constructed.
The new 2-ton bulletproof case automatically monitored and adjusted barometric pressure, temperature, and humidity according to changing weather conditions. But when the electricity shut down, so did the protection. With no one to return the container to its secured storage vault, it's now on display in Turin for eternity. Three days after people. In this empty church, the stained glass depicts one of the most important creatures in the Bible. Sheep thrived into the modern era, and by the 21st century, their population had swelled to more than 1 billion worldwide. Now, sheep are suddenly in grave danger as predators line up for the feast. But some still have a chance of survival. For 6,000 years, Anatolian dogs were specifically bred to guard sheep from predators.
If the dog's flock is threatened by bear or mountain lion or wolves, the dog will seek out the threat.
The dogs have even evolved to resemble the sheep. Their light-colored coats and black muzzles help them to blend in, making it hard for predators to pinpoint their exact location. But how long will the canine shepherds tend to their flocks? It's 4 days after people, and in Rio de Janeiro, the night has returned to darkness. Unknown to the millions who lived below, this statue had a secret power. As part of a major renovation program aimed to preserve it, workers gave the Redeemer an electric force field.
In the year 2000, the statue was fitted with a cathode mesh system, which actually is a mesh of wires that was installed inside the statue, and then they were electrified with a low voltage charge. The low voltage charge actually draws corrosion away from the original steel reinforcement, and the wire mesh takes on that corrosion.
Without its force field, how long can the Redeemer last?
We know from the history of the statue that corrosion will take hold again very, very quickly.
One week after people. In Rome, towering above all else is the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, reputedly built directly above the tomb of St. Peter, the first pope. Designed by Michelangelo and completed in 1626, the 452-foot-tall engineering marvel is still one of the tallest dome structures in the world. But it's been plagued by structural problems from the beginning.
After construction, it formed cracks around the base because of the outward expansion of the dome structure.
The solution to that was to insert chains and tension those chains to close up the crack as best they could, and they are still there today.
The chains were designed to hug the inner dome, like the iron bands that hold a barrel together. Rather than actual links, the system uses interlocking iron bars.
The chains themselves are wrought iron. Wrought iron will rust on the surface, but won't rust through. The rust on the surface protects the rest of the iron. The chains will maintain their strength for hundreds of years if left alone.
Outside the Vatican roams a creature once unwelcome on these streets. Black cats were long associated with pagan rituals. In the year 1233, Pope Gregory IX pronounced them instruments of the devil. Eventually, they were considered to bring bad luck. Even as recently as 2006, an estimated 60,000 were killed in Italy by superstitious people. In 2007, animal rights groups petitioned the Pope to renounce the slaughter. Now, with no humans to cross their paths, black cats will repopulate the country. Two months after people. The sun is setting on the tombs of the dead. In the time of humans, eternal rest wasn't always eternal. These poor souls are resting in pieces. Why are these bones hidden in the floor? Unlike the wide-open spaces of America, where burial plots could remain untouched, burial practices in modern Europe included an ancient method of maximizing space, the ossuary.
Individuals are buried in a grave for a period of time until they skeletonize. The skeleton is removed from the burial site and moved to an ossuary. So you can just get more buried people in one area. And then the burial ground is reused.
Evidence of ossuaries date back well beyond 3000 BC. The largest are the Paris catacombs, thought to contain the bones of more than 6 million people.
There was a sense in Christian theology that sooner or later there would be a day of judgment, a resurrection of the dead, and it was imagined that people would inhabit their former bodies.
This is true with many religions today. We must treat the remains of the deceased properly and with respect so that they make a transition into the afterlife properly.
The remains of these forgotten souls are now mingled forever. It's 6 months into a life after people, and even the modern cathedrals of God face an uncertain future. The Crystal Cathedral Megachurch, just outside Los Angeles, was once one of the most recognized symbols of the Christian faith. With a worldwide television broadcast attracting 20 million followers. Seating nearly 3,000 worshippers, it's one of the largest glass buildings in the world. The 10,000 panes of glass are attached with a silicon adhesive. The flexibility of the silicon is intended to help the glass resist up to 100-mile-per-hour winds and survive an 8.0 earthquake. But there's another LA hazard attacking the windows.
In a time of people, air pollution has really affected the glass quite a bit. The acid air contaminants like oxides of nitrogen, smog, eat away at the glass's protective reflective coating.
Every year, a thorough inspection and cleaning operation took place to remedy any deterioration. The difficult work required 2 weeks and 100,000 gallons of ammonia and water. The only cleaning the windows will be getting now is the infrequent Southern California rainstorm. Like a biblical apocalypse, the natural world is winning the battle against man's achievements. And only one faithful servant can prevent the coming slaughter. It's 1 year into a life after people. Like grim prophecies ripped from the pages of Revelations, the world's greatest structures crack and crumble, helpless in the wake of man's absence. The 2,000-year-old Colosseum in Rome is one of the most famous buildings ever built by man. Inside these ancient walls, it's estimated 1 million people met violent deaths just for the entertainment of Rome's bloodthirsty citizens. In 1349, a massive earthquake brought down the entire southern wall. Looters hauled off pieces of the facade for use in other buildings, including St. Peter's Basilica. Even though there is now no one to clean and care for it, the ancient arena could still outlast the best modern buildings.
The Colosseum is an incredible structure because it's built by a culture that invented concrete.
There are no reinforcing rods. And no reinforcing rods means there's no steel to rust. No steel rusting means no expansion and extra cracks. It was built to last. It was built for the ages.
Across the globe, is another Colosseum built for Christians to flock to. Constructed in 1923, the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum once attracted a record audience of more than 134,000 worshippers to an appearance by Billy Graham. In year one after people, no amount of prayer can cast out the seeds of destruction.
The Los Angeles Coliseum is totally open as a structure. Animals and plant life can move right into the arcades under the stands. So this is a building that's going to get attacked both from inside and outside very, very quickly.
Two Colosseums, constructed some 1,900 years apart, but which structure will last the longest? Five years after people, and a biblical symbol of evil is on the rise. In the book of Genesis, the evil presence in the Garden of Eden, a serpent, turns man against the will of God.
The symbol of evil was the serpent. And this symbolism transcends all the way down into modern culture.
Venomous serpents, like the rattlesnake, were a menace to mankind, a menace man tried to eradicate.
What I have here is Crotalus atrox, the western diamondback rattlesnake. Now, people and snakes, they intersect in everyday lives.
In the time of humans, rattlesnakes were contained with annual roundups held in the American South and Midwest. The snakes were hunted to protect cattle and entertain the curious at popular festivals. On average, some 16,000 snakes were captured and killed every year. But now, it's the snakes that are staging a roundup of a different sort.
5 years after people, you're looking at the beginning of an arms race between the rodent empire and the snake empire. Remove people from the equation. Immediately you have tons and tons of human waste. All these rodents would move in. The snakes would follow the food. And since they're opportunistic eaters, they'll be going after city mice, rats, even small cats, baby kittens, anything that follows the food and takes over an urban sprawl once people leave is just rife for pickings by snakes.
5 years without their human predators, and the serpent is looking to make a comeback. There are other predators on the prowl. These wolves are in search of an easy meal. But they won't find it here. The Anatolian dogs still guard their sheep, willing to fight to the death to protect them. That unswerving dedication begins at the moment of a sheep's birth.
The dogs will guard the ewes while they're having their lambs. They'll help the ewe deliver the placenta, and then the placenta will be taken away and be eaten by the dogs so it doesn't draw the wolves or the coyotes out of the hills.
Even in times of sickness, the dog goes to extreme lengths for the good of the flock.
The dog will guard the sick animal until it either gets better or it dies. 2, 3, 5 generations down the road, you're not going to see much change in the trait of these dogs.
But as wild dogs disperse, crossbreeding with Anatolians could rearrange the guardian's DNA and leave the sheep vulnerable to predators. "25 years after people, the glorious walls of the Crystal Cathedral have once again become a unique kind of sanctuary. The megachurch was designed with glass panels that automatically open and close. With no power now, a steady stream of wind-blown seeds have found their way in through open panels.
Very soon after people, plants would become king of this holy kingdom.
The former church is now a greenhouse, as the glass allows in solar heat and even supports an automatic sprinkler system.
As the moisture comes up in cool evenings, it would coat the undersides of the glass and drip back down. And you'd have a cycle, almost a natural rain cycle inside, even if you didn't have it outside.
The Crystal Cathedral is well on its way to becoming a new Garden of Eden. But the 10,000 glass panes were not designed for such a role in a life after people.
The rubber and the gaskets will degrade over time. If they aren't giving close attention, those pieces of glass will start falling out.
In Rome, amid the dark, deteriorating structures, a strange white-walled building juts up from the undergrowth. This is the Jubilee Church. Completed in 2003, its immense concrete walls were intended to represent the longevity of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, they are doing just that. The walls somehow still gleam white and resist the destructive rampage of plant life. Could the city of Rome, center of the Roman Catholic faith, be experiencing a genuine miracle in a life after people? "50 years after people, and standing 2,400 feet on the peak of Brazil's Corcovado Mountain, the 1,145-ton Christ the Redeemer is struggling to maintain his pose.
As you get closer, you'll realize that some of the outside veneer, the fine detail of soapstone, will have pulled away.
Renovation work in the year 2000 revealed weak spots.
The first things to fail are likely to be where the statue has been patched in the past, especially the wrists, some sections of the arms, the neck. That's where the greatest stresses have occurred on the structure.
It's the beginning of the end for Christ the Redeemer's reign on earth. In 50 years without people, unstoppable forces play hell with man's legacy. In one remote desert, a devil wind is methodically drowning homes and dismantling a town, brick by brick. Here, a biblical plague has already arrived. "50 years after people. Desert towns around the world are being sandblasted into oblivion. How do we know this? There's one forsaken place in the middle of an ancient desert where it's already happened. This is Kolmanskop, Namibia. It may seem like a hellish mirage rising from southern Africa's Namibia Desert, but this is no illusion. It's a town whose fate could have come from the pages of the Old Testament. Hundreds of miles south of Windhoek, the Namibian capital city, Kolmanskop is hanging on in a godforsaken corner of the desert. Dozens of homes and public buildings scar the desert hillside like half-buried corpses. In 1903, it was a boomtown where hundreds of Germans lived and worked under the harshest conditions.
It's a very harsh environment, lots of wind. That wind can carry a lot of sand. It can be extremely irritating, an annoying place to live.
Why would anyone choose to live in the middle of this desert? diamonds. Millions of years earlier, diamonds erupted from the earth and were slowly scattered and blown north into the Namibian desert. In Kolmanskop, the workers literally plucked them from the surface, often using just the light of the moon. Today, their once comfortable social halls and living rooms are now visited by an unwelcome guest: the very desert itself.
This house acts as a natural wind block so that the sand that comes in through the windows and doors accumulates here and piles up in the walls and grows higher and higher, sort of like water on a sinking ship.
Doors are frozen in place. Stairways lead to nowhere. And baths that once held precious water are drowning in a sea of sand. Everywhere, the fine grains invade the weakened structures, forming perfect dunes disturbed only by the footprints of rodents. In pursuit of the rodents come the modern-day residents of Kolmanskop. A variety of serpents, including the deadly coral snake, now call these hallways their home. As the dunes slowly fill each room, sand pummels the building's exteriors.
You can see that the sand grains at the base have cut through and physically eroded away the wall, leaving a huge gap. We can follow that along this wall, partly covered up by dune sand, and down here we have the ultimate next step result is that the gravitational forces have literally allowed this wall to drop into that gap, and if we follow it further down, we see the final product of the entire crumbled down wall and the collapsed roof on top.
How quickly the buildings deteriorate depends on the quality of the brickwork.
Here's an excellent example of a south-facing wall showing the different weathering. We've got the more resistant coarse-grained bricks above, which are stick out in positive relief. The mortar in between the bricks is softer, is weathered out. Below that, we have the opposite. We've got soft bricks that have weathered out preferentially and left behind the harder mortar in between.
Even though Kolmanskop is surrounded by desert, it's surprisingly close to the Atlantic Ocean. When the diamonds began drying up, just a few years after its founding, the German miners built another prospecting outpost 12 miles south at a place called Elizabeth Bay. Here, it is the sea salt that has destroyed the brickwork. Many of the bricks have completely disappeared, leaving behind the mortar that once held them in place. The extreme conditions often forced the settlers inside. Known as the casino, this once magnificent structure was a regular gathering place for concerts and even church services.
They built a theater, they had a lot of musical events, and there wasn't a lot else to do, and there was not a lot of interest in being outdoors in the harsh environment.
By the early 1930s, the diamonds in Kolmanskop and Elizabeth Bay had all but dried up. The last family departed in 1956. The landscape of Kolmanskop provides a fitting requiem for man's demise. From dust you came, to dust you shall return. "75 years after people. In the midst of Rome's decaying buildings, the Jubilee Church is still standing tall and bright. How can the concrete walls remain so clean and white with no humans to maintain them? The structure is a miracle of engineering.
This church is actually coated with a titanium dioxide-based cement. It's called photocatalytic cement. And what this material does, with sunlight, it will actually decompose CO2 and environmental pollutants and self-clean the church.
The cement sheds dirt and water with ease, making it difficult for plants to colonize.
This beautiful white exterior theoretically could last forever.
Another modern temple, the Crystal Cathedral, is still the world's greatest glass megachurch. But the works of man are humbled by greater forces.
Ultimately, we'd be left with a fairly light structural steel frame with very few panes of glass. And finally, the process of steel corrosion would bring the whole structure down.
Beneath the rubble of civilization, the ancient symbol of evil incarnate is king. With no human predators, rattlesnakes are growing to enormous sizes.
The larger an animal gets, the more it can breed, and genetically, the larger the offspring will be. It could be getting to the point, well, right now, the western diamondback, the largest recorded individual was approaching 7 feet long. If we were to leave that alone for 10, 15, 100 years, imagine the size of that snake as it could just grow unchecked, to the point where it could possibly become an apex predator like some South American species. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 8 or 9 foot rattlesnake in as little as 50 years.
75 years after people and 65 million years after the dinosaurs, the age of the reptiles has returned. "100 years after people. The roof of the Chapel of the Holy Shroud in Turin is the only barrier separating the heavens and the famous shroud below. Leaking cracks in the 15th century dome finally reach the point of collapse, exposing the shroud to sunlight.
The growing concern over the years was that any kind of UV exposure perhaps would cause an aging or a darkening of the rest of the cloth.
The daily doses of UV radiation are slowly fading the shroud's famous image. But another, more destructive force is pressing the attack.
The greatest risk to the Shroud of Turin, or any ancient linen, isn't so much the ultraviolet from light as it is humidity or moisture.
In just a few short years, as rainstorms saturate the rotten seals, mold begins attacking the linen. The image many believed was Jesus Christ is destroyed by a simple fungus. "150 years after people. Compared to the ancient concrete in the Rome Colosseum, the reinforced concrete of the Los Angeles Colosseum is in dire straits. In the time of humans, the 1994 Northridge earthquake caused nearly $100 million in damage to the structure.
The damage was quite extensive, especially in the reinforced concrete columns and beams supporting the upper concourse.
Now, another earthquake rumbles through Los Angeles. Roman-style arches made of modern concrete are shattered. The cheap seats provide a front-row platform to the destruction. It's 250 years after people. The Colosseum in Rome is little changed. In the time of humans, the relentless clearing of plant life by maintenance staff kept the walls pristine. Now, extreme plant growth is choking the ancient concrete, but something is preserving it for the ages.
The Romans used the same kind of limestone that we use, but as an aggregate, they used volcanic ash. It's a little bit finer, and the chemical balance, somewhat by accident, was just about perfect.
The volcanic ash within is so dense, water can't penetrate the concrete, so can't expand during freeze-thaw cycles. Rome's Colosseum has withstood the ravages of time and the elements. Across the world, the corroded bones of Christ the Redeemer are now covered in a robe of green.
The plant life would have colonized it. Wind would have scoured some of the surface.
Ultimately, in a really high wind event, this statue could topple over.
As the remaining monuments to God crack and crumble, will the last shepherd on earth resist the urge to abandon his flock? "500 years after people. The absence of humans has turned most sacred places into hellish visions of biblical prophecy.
Specifically in the book of Revelation, where we're painted this horrible picture of earth as a place of absolute and total destruction, where everything that existed on earth no longer exists.
5 centuries after people, the mountain overlooking Rio de Janeiro is no longer graced by the figure of Jesus Christ.
Probably 400 or 500 years from now, on top of this mountain will be something that looks like a huge tree that's overgrown, and that was once the statue of Christ the Redeemer.
At the Vatican, the dome of St. Peter's Basilica still rises high above the city. But the iron support chains are being pushed to the limit.
Over time, in the absence of people, that dome structure would want to expand at the base. That's going to be the vulnerable area of the dome.
As the base pushes outward, a second force is acting from above. After the dome's completion in 1590, a cross and a decorative lantern weighing more than 3 tons were placed on top. At the base, rainwater has attacked St. Peter's flat roof.
I think the first thing that's going to go on St. Peter's is the roofing material. Sheets of metal that probably over the next 200 or 300 years are going to start weathering through. The roof will eventually disappear.
Ultimately, corrosion will take over, the chains will break, and the extra support to the dome will be gone.
A 1,000 years after people. Without reinforcing rods to tear it apart, the Colosseum is still a testament to Roman concrete. But the thicket growing inside is winning this battle.
Birds have carried seeds from all corners of the Roman Empire throughout its history and deposited them there. And In a life after people, that may be a large part of what will eventually bring the rest of those walls down.
In its weakened condition, an earthquake gives the home of the gladiators a final push. Despite the passage of many centuries, incredibly, Anatolian sheepdogs are still on guard duty over their flocks. They have avoided interbreeding with other dogs, which would have dulled their sheep herding instincts.
In life after people, the dogs will not crossbreed because any dog that they see will be presumed to be a predator. So you could see 10, 20 generations down the road, these dogs doing what they've been bred to do for the past 6,000 years.
The remnants of humans, their sacred sites, cathedrals, and images of their gods have returned to dust. But the spirit of man lives on in the legacy of devotion between the sheepdog and his flock.